Okay, we're looking at the final section of Chapter 18 about the Enlightenment, the birth of the American Republic. Thomas Paine was a writer who used Enlightenment ideas to write a book that was the biggest selling book in the colonies called Common Sense. Thomas Paine's book, Common Sense, got the colonists debating about whether or not they should go to war with Britain. He used Enlightenment ideas such as rejecting prejudice. He said tyranny of kings was wrong. We've got to get rid of that. We need to get freedom. We need to use our reason. Natural law should be what govern people, not tyrannical ideas from kings. So common sense was a huge factor in us declaring war ultimately with England. The French and Indian War, which was called the 7 Years' War worldwide, but in North America it was called the French and Indian War, was basically Britain and France fighting in America. And so the British had to supply a lot of troops to win that war, and they did it, ultimately to protect the colonies, which was their investment. And so King George III thought that the colonies should pay for the fact that the British had fought the French there. And so he started to put on them the stamp tax and the Stamp Act and the tea taxes. And so in 1763, King George, benign neglect was over. Benign neglect had been pretty much Britain had kept their hands off of the colonies, but now George III reasserts British power and says, pay me these taxes. And so that started leading to trouble. The Stamp Act, a tax on tea. And so the colonists said, we don't want to be taxed because we don't have any representatives in Parliament. It's wrong. They were using British ideas of freedom, and they said, you can't tax us because we don't have any representatives in Parliament. So in 1775, fighting broke out. The Continental Congress was convened. The famous American founders, John Adams, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, were involved in establishing this Continental Congress to talk about what are we going to do now. And so ultimately they chose to break from Britain and write the Declaration of Independence. They set up an army, and in these famous words from Thomas Jefferson, which he borrowed ideas from John Locke, the Enlightenment philosopher, he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. You can see the Enlightenment ideas here. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People need natural rights. They need freedom, Jefferson writes. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So Enlightenment ideas in the Declaration of Independence. A government's only legitimate if the people consent to it, if they go along with it. And a government's purpose is to protect the rights of the people. So Jefferson's ideas straight from the Enlightenment ideas. So obviously this led to war with England, and it looked bleak for the colonists because the British had professional soldiers, they had a huge fleet, they had money, they were probably the most powerful empire in the world at that time. A third of the colonists were loyalists. That means they were loyal to England. So even at home, not everyone was convinced we should go to war. The Continental Army, the colonist army under George Washington, they had little money for soldiers. They didn't have much of a treasury. But the one thing they did have was that they were fighting for their own land. So a turning point in the war came when we got the help of the French, because we won the Battle of Saratoga. That led the French to believe, you know what, if they can win at Saratoga, these upstarts, these little colonists there, they have a chance to win. Let's help them. Now, there were some tough times, and of course, George Washington is famous for having taken the troops morally through the valley of the Valley Forge and the terrible winter there. But we prevailed, and ultimately in 1781 at Yorktown, Washington danced like a little boy with his horse and twirled his cap around when the French fleet came into Yorktown, preventing Cornwallis from being the British general from being able to get out. And so when we defeated the British, the most powerful country in the world, in 1781, it led to the Treaty of Paris, which made the United States independent. We were now our own country. We were no longer a British colony, and the Mississippi was our western border. And so, woo, freedom for America. And so the Constitution was written in 1787 when the original Articles of Confederation proved inadequate to run the country, and the Constitution was ratified in 1789. So here you can see the borders of the Treaty of Paris. You can see that the United States, no longer now a colony of Britain, was given all the way to the Mississippi River. Okay, let's look at the impact of Enlightenment ideas now that America's been born as a nation. First of all, look at the ideas in the U.S. Constitution. From the enlightened philosophers, Locke, government should be ruled by the consent of the governed. You know, we're a democracy, we're a republic. People should revolt when a government destroys natural rights. Locke's idea led to the revolution. Montesquieu said that there should be a separation of powers. The executive branch, the president, the legislative branch, the Congress, and the judicial branches should be separated. And we do that in America. We have three different branches of government. Enlightenment ideas provide for an elective legislature. You know, let people have a say by electing people. We have that in America. We elected a president rather than a monarch, which all the old world nations had. They had a king. And of course, freedom. We had the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. The great American freedoms were part of that original Constitution after those were added in the first year. So the U.S. Constitution and the Republic of the U.S. stand as a symbol of freedom to European countries and Central America. So France, a few years later, 1789, they had a revolution in the name of liberty and equality, and it toppled the monarchy, the long-standing monarchy in France. France, you know, got courage from the example of America. And by the mid-1800s, most absolute monarchs across Europe would see their powers greatly reduced. So the impact of the American Revolution was huge. Benjamin Franklin was like a French philosophe. He spent a lot of time in France, but he was America's philosophe. He was like the quintessential example of the Enlightenment in America. He invented bifocals, which you see as part of the picture there. And he had this quote there saying, "Much of the strength and efficiency of any government in procuring and securing happiness to the people depends on public opinion." So you see he's got the Enlightenment idea there that a government should go by what the people think. A totally radical idea, new in the world. Okay, this ends our study of Chapter 18 in the Enlightenment.